75 minutes to get through this. We have a few slides and we're chock full of demo. And I want to make sure you get a good sneak peek at not just what's shipping today with Configuration Manager and Forefront Endpoint Protection, but some of the technology that's coming out in beta towards the summer and the fall. So let's start real quick. There's been a lot of conversation recently about consumerization of IT. As new devices have been sold into the consumer marketplace and as those come into the corporate environment, it's many of our jobs to kind of manage that explosion of new devices and bring that in and sort of get it under control. And so to add a little bit of flavor to it, we want to do a quick voice of the customer. This was in Las Vegas earlier this year at the Microsoft Management Summit.
What does consumerization of IT mean to me?
It's a big challenge.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Consumerization of IT, it means for me personally that I want to connect wherever I am.
Actually, consumerization of IT has kind of come to us.
Consumerism of IT, I'm not sure.
Anything from Android devices to iPads to iPhones.
But from a standards thing, we're challenged with that. We want to provide a quality service end over end each time.
Consumerization IT is a blending of this with this.
Keep me connected all the time to my data.
It means we have to revisit, revise our solutions that we bring to our customers.
So that is the consumerization of IT. And when we've thought about sort of how we're going to evolve the tools for managing devices within the corporate environment, over the last 5 years, we've done a lot to talk about what we call user-centric computing. When we got into this business about 15 years ago, it was an element manager business. We got into it with Systems Management Server 1.0, and the idea was that we wanted to make sure that Windows was out there, that it was running, and the physical hardware that it was running on was healthy. So that was measuring CPU, available memory, making sure the spindles were spinning correctly, et cetera. But it was a very device-centric approach to management. Over the years, and Robert talked about this morning, the latest data from Forrester says that in most corporations, people are going to have anywhere from 4 to 5 corporate connected devices, or connected devices generally. That actually includes machines that are at their home, sort of owned by the individual as well. But today, it's not just about sort of making sure that device is healthy. It's about applying a smart set of policies against an individual user so that you have your apps, your data available to you on your device at any and all time. And so that model of user-centric management has been one that we've taken to heart, and we've built that into a lot of our tools within System Center. So it becomes about figuring out the end user, applying a specific set of policy against them, and having that policy roam and adapt itself depending on the type of corporate experience or the computing experience the user is coming in. Now we talk about a lot of the blurring of the context between home and work, and sort of every one of us at 5 p.m. becomes a consumer once again. And this blurring has really created some challenges. Technically, it creates a lot of challenges in the management tools. So if we take, for example, this device here, this is my Windows Mobile device. It needs to be well managed and has to have policy applied to it to make it compliant with Microsoft IT's own internal standards. But when I'm out on the weekends taking pictures of my brother fishing or my daughters sort of at a birthday party, there's a lot of data on here that's not necessarily, it doesn't belong to the company, right? It's my data, and this is my device, but it has to be managed within the context of a work environment. Likewise, if I have a work experience at home and I'm going to, I get a call on the weekend, and we'll show you a video a little bit later on, or I may need to come in from my home machine and sort of get into the VPN. So I want to tunnel into the corporate network and be able to access corporate resources there. My MSIT department wants to know that device that's coming into the network has a certain level of policy and compliance, because it wants to know that device is safe and can sort of roam freely within the corporate network. And the blurring of these has created a lot of challenges in the way that we think about providing tools for you to manage these devices in somewhat of a blurred context. So let me keep going here. And so providing, that again is where this user centricity becomes very, very important to us, because if we can associate a policy, a set of applications, and a set of data with that user and make sure that is safe as he travels around, for that corporate information that's associated with the user, you can apply that policy and make sure that's a well-managed experience. Now the challenges that we get asked as IT professionals is, how do I make sure that users are always productive? They may want to work from home. They may want to work from a Starbucks sort of down the street. but they want to be able to have access to their apps and their devices from anywhere they are. If that's the device that they personally own, so they went down to Best Buy and they picked up a PC, they're going to want that same corporate computing experience available on that device. At the same time, how do you protect and maintain the data that you're responsible for protecting and maintain? Not necessarily the pictures of my brother's fishing trip or the pictures of my daughter, but for the corporate data that's important that you have the right set of standards and policies around, how do you maintain that compliance when all these devices are coming in a fairly uncontrolled fashion? And then finally, how do you not only enable the work-life blur, but take advantage of this as a potential to make people more productive and more efficient? It's not just about creating really hard boundaries that say this is your experience when you're within a corporate environment and this is your experience when you're sort of at home, but how do you actually enable that blurring of the work-life experience and get the best of both worlds? In many ways, at 5 o'clock when we check out of our corporate environment and we come home, end users have been conditioned, we've all been conditioned to a new way of experiencing IT. It's a lot about search, it's a lot about self-service, it's a lot about marketplaces, and being able to find, friction-free experiences, whether that's acquiring a song, sort of a video, or getting a new piece of software for your phone or your computer. We've been conditioned over the last few years to have a much more empowered experience of our own computing, of our own computing experience. And enabling those same kind of trends that have been emerging on the consumer side, bringing that same level of productivity within the corporate environment, but doing so in a way that continues to be well managed and well governed. That actually represents what we believe is a big sea change for you to be able to provide not just embracing these new changes, but also providing a fundamentally better and more modern user experience for your users within the environment. So there's 4 things that we've thought about as we have built this next generation of tools. There's 4 things that we wanted to move the ball forward on. The first is this idea of shifting the model away from being able to apply policy against a specific set of physical resources and more towards being able to have a device-centric approach or a user-centric approach to management. The second is that we wanted to bring mobile devices sort of within the umbrella of System Center. Mobile devices, as we saw this morning in Robert's keynote, this year marked an interesting tipping point where smartphones actually outsold PCs. And when we look out in our crystal ball 5 years from now, we see that these smart endpoint devices, mobile in all of its forms, from highly portable laptops, netbooks, smartphones, etc., that's going to represent well over 60% of the installed base within the corporate computing environment. And so how you embrace those and provide a level of management on top of those mobile devices becomes a critical question that we needed to answer with this generation of the products. How do you support productivity anywhere? From inside the firewall, from outside the firewall, we wanted to be able to provide a set of experiences that also reflected the different types of application deployment approaches that you might use. So if you're running a non-Windows device with a Citrix receiver on it, that might be a different lightweight experience versus what we would give you if it had a full-powered desktop sitting underneath your desk, versus what you might want if you're running a lightweight phone or a session-based virtualization on a lightweight device. But being able to support productivity anywhere and support a lot of different application models for how you actually deploy those apps to the users was important in this version of the tools. And then finally, how you integrate management, security, and compliance. We've announced in March of this year, we have a new product called Forefront Endpoint Protection. That gives you your antivirus, the malware protection, and it's built right on the same infrastructure that you use for Configuration Manager. This is going to allow people to reduce fully half of their infrastructure that's currently used today. They have a set of infrastructure that's used for managing PCs and pushing out software deployments, and they typically have a separate parallel set of infrastructure they use for managing security and pushing out antivirus signatures. And we think that by bringing these two tools together into a single pane of glass running on a single infrastructure, we're going to be able to drive a lot of cost out of your environment. And so making that just a seamless experience from one console has been a big design point of this release. Today we're excited to announce Beta 2 of Configuration Manager 2012. This is available today. The slides are going to be available offline if you want to go take a look at this link. But I really encourage you to go out and get your hands on the beta if you want to get a hold of it. The best way to experience the product in many ways, we'll give you a sneak peek of it today in the demos, but getting a hold of the product, downloading it, and actually putting it through its paces is going to be the best way for you to learn around this next generation of products. So ConfigMan 2012, again, 3 big pillars of this release. The first, which Neha's going to come show you some of the new technology, actually Mike as well, is really about empowering the end users. And so giving them a different experience. The end users are going to see what we call it a self-service portal, but there's an application catalog, so they can go up and they can see the applications that you've published and made available to the end users, but they get much more of that self-service experience that they're used to getting when they're a consumer at home. So they can go up and they can find the applications that they're looking for, and they can download those. And then behind the scenes, we're doing a lot of the heavy lifting to provide the right deployment experience for that user. Depending on the type of user, the policy that's applied to the user, and the device that they're coming into the system with. Unifying infrastructure, again, bring in endpoint protection in with Configuration Manager. This is going to allow you to reduce about half of your current infrastructure that's used to deploy signatures and software across the enterprise. Then finally, simplifying the administration. We love the Microsoft Management Console. That was a UI that served us well for many, many years. We've moved beyond that, and as you'll see in the demo ahead, we're giving you a much more modern user experience within the IT tools themselves. And so things like we've baked metaphors like search very deeply into the UI. We've got the ribbon, which many of you are going to be familiar with Office, et cetera. So we've really refreshed and given you a very modern set of tools for the modern cockpit for IT, if you will. Device freedom. So embracing devices, for the most part, most folks here, how many people here use Exchange on a mobile device? Exchange Active Sync? So Exchange Active Sync has been out there for a number of years. We have got a new connector for Exchange directly into the System Center console, so you'll be able to see all the devices that are currently managed by the Exchange Active Sync protocol, and you'll be able to apply policy directly from within Configuration Manager. This gives you basically the ability to not just do asset inventory and recognition of the devices on your network, but actually apply a base level of management and policy against all of those. We cover the iOS devices, which gives you the iPad and the iPhone. We're covering the Windows devices. Obviously, we're covering Symbian as well. Pretty much every device in the industry, with the exception of BlackBerry. RIM chooses to have their own enterprise server. They've not signed an Exchange Active Sync license. But with that one exception, you're going to have a pretty broad range of mobile devices that are going to be supported directly from within the Systems Management Console. So let me ask Mike Chan to come up here real quick and give you a quick overview of what we can do from within System Center 2012. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Garth. So for a lot of you, this may be the first time that you've seen System Center Configuration Manager 2012. Wake it up there. As Garth mentioned, we've done a couple of things here, right? First of all, how many of you guys actually love the MMC and wish it stuck around, right? You can have the MMC. Everybody else gets this. We actually have the same ribbon that Garth mentioned. It is context sensitive, so you'll notice if I go to different categories and scenarios here, it actually will change. I'll show you a little bit about the search as well to show how effective this is. And we've made it so much more simplified, right? You either are administrating things, like setting policies, you're doing things around deploying applications or software, operating systems, things like that. You're trying to run reports, right, around monitoring, or you basically want to find out about assets and monitoring. So if you think about the mobile space, one of the first things you're going to want to do is actually figure out how many of these things are actually out there. And as Garth mentioned, traditionally you may already have BES servers out there, or maybe you're using Exchange Active Sync, but it's actually not too easy to figure out how all this stuff actually comes together. So one of the first things you can actually go do is you want to run a report. And since we've unified that infrastructure and bought these mobile devices under management, I can just go directly to monitoring. I'm going to go ahead and click on reports. Oh, it's thinking a little bit there. I'm going to go ahead and click on reports. You see that we actually have 411 built-in reports here in this system. And normally, you might have to just scroll down and read through each one, but we've brought this context of search into the user interface as well. So I'm new at this. I'm just going to type in mobile. Not quite sure what's going to show up. 24 results. Still don't want to read through all of that, and kind of just want to figure out what my mobile count is. And you'll see that actually there's 3 baked-in reports here that actually do all sorts of different stuff. Count the applications that are on devices. I see that the last one there actually just says count the mobile devices by platforms. Sounds like the one for me. So when I open that report up, and actually it's using our SQL backend reporting services, builds all this stuff out on the fly. You can see it's a live demo here. And it's actually counting all the iPhones, iPads, Symbians, Windows Phone, as well as other devices. It's using that Exchange Active Sync capability. right? So it's actually pulling all this information that normally sits in Exchange and integrating it into the same place that you're used to seeing all of your other asset and inventory information. Furthermore, I can even drill down some more, right? So I see I've got about 5,365 Windows Phone devices. I click on that. I even get a hardware profile. So if you look at this, you kind of find out, well, guess what? Samsung devices are probably the most popular in my organization. And so you can even go a little step further and say, well, there's certain things that I can do for those types of devices there, for the HTC vendors, and I've got a majority of, for instance, my Windows Phone 7 platforms covered. So now that I know how many devices that are out there, what's the next step? All right? Every one of you guys, if you're using Exchange ActiveSync to get your mail, you probably have a PIN on you. That doesn't sort of automatically happen. Someone had to go make that change. I'll show you how to do it here in Configuration Manager. And since it's a policy thing, I click on Administration, and you'll see this group here called Exchange Server Connectors. You can actually have multiple connectors, right? So you imagine if you have subsidiaries or different groups that are all in different Exchange servers, you can still pull all of that information into the same place and run one report to figure out all your devices throughout your enterprise. So that's extremely, extremely powerful. One quick thing I'll call out on this screen is that you'll see that it actually says www.outlook.com. You can actually tie this even to our online Microsoft's public cloud email offering, right? Exchange Online or Office 365 will actually, they've enabled that Exchange ActiveSync connectivity. So even if you have all your email in the cloud and your devices are obviously just held by your employees, but you still have to manage your systems using this on-premises solution, it all still ties together. So by flipping over the Settings tab, I can see all of the different policies that you'd normally be able to set through something like Exchange ActiveSync. Now, we do offer a much higher level degree of management for Windows mobile devices, but the majority of the devices that are out there today, pretty much if you get email, you're going to abide by a lot of the Exchange ActiveSync policies. And looking through a couple of different settings here, I can open up an email management, which actually says what the policy is around sync, how often they can actually pull, the message format. You can set all of those policies here. On the security side, you can go as far as disabling disabling things like the Bluetooth for increased security, turning off the camera. So when I worked at Intel, they have a very, very strict policy, right? Because literally, if you steal the design for the chip, that's billions of lost dollars for them. So if you're a company like Intel, you probably want to say, you can have your phone. I'm going to turn everything off. No Bluetooth, no Wi-Fi, no picture taking, obviously, and to enable them to still use their devices but not be able to send out confidential information. But the thing I want to do most, obviously, is set a password. Because if you're going to give them access to corporate assets like email or even SharePoint or things like that, you want to basically say, hey, I need to put up some barriers here. So I can require a password on this device. The default here is 4. You can make it 5 digits, 8 digits. I've also got a setting here that says you can't use 7 of your last passwords. And if you lose your phone and someone's trying to get in, after 10 tries, it's actually going to automatically wipe your device. Right? You've clearly lost your phone. Didn't call up support to help get the device unlocked. And so that's a setting that you can set there. And you'll notice that we actually actively can help determine whether settings are set within Exchange or Configuration Manager. You can bring all of these into Configuration Manager, or you can allow some of this to still be managed by your email messaging systems. So I'm going to hit OK there. And then one of the last things you generally have to do is wipe a phone, right? If you guys have worked for IT for more than 5 days, you probably had to deal with something like this. Cell phones get lost all the time in cabs. My wife seems to lose them in our house. And I know a user, her name is Melissa, just using that same search context. Oops, I misspelled her name there. I know her last name is Clark. And by looking through this, it's actually searching through literally those almost 35,000 devices that you saw were in a database. Comes back very, very quickly, and you see I've located Melissa Clark's Windows Phone. And from this screen, I can actually directly wipe that device. I'm not going to hit yes here because we want to be able to give this demo again in the future. So as you can see, what we've done with System Center Configuration Manager 2012 is we've actually brought mobile device management into the same fold that you manage your desktop devices, your laptop devices. We can help you manage those policies across all those devices, and you can even go as far as helping to wipe these devices. So what we're doing is not only letting people use whatever device they want in the trend of consumerization, but also make sure that they actually do it in a safe and secure manner. So with that, I'll hand it back to Garth. Thanks. We can take the questions at the end, but the answer is yes, but only for Windows mobile platforms today, not through the Exchange ActiveSync.
So thanks, Mike. Now I wanted to move a little bit into user centricity and talk about what it's going to mean to become much more user-centric in the way we think about deploying applications. And so to walk you through the new application models, I have Neha Sharma, who's going to come up here and take us through ConfigMan 2012 once again.
Thank you so much, Garth. So one of the things about what I'm going to show you is this intelligent application model. I don't know how many of you attended the flexible workspace this morning session, but they talked about this intelligent application model that embraces all different forms of an application can take, and also the platforms it can run on. And then it is dynamically using these real-time rules to make sure that the end user gets the right app at the right time. So we do this all through Configuration Manager 2012, and I'll walk you through those. There are two scenarios that when we think about consumerization or an app delivery, there are two scenarios, right? There's an end user scenario, and then there's an IT admin scenario. So let's walk through both of these. And this is, it's not my right machine here. So let's see. 1 minute, I'm getting to my machine. Sorry, there you go. So this is my end user machine. Now, we're doing this demo on Contoso. That's the organization background. And as Contoso, they have used VDI, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure, and we're using Microsoft Hyper-V along with Citrix XenDesktop to make this applications available and to get the virtual desktop available. So I'll just log in as Melissa using my password, and let's see if I can type it right. So is my domain. And what you're seeing is it's actually connecting at the back end and getting this logon information. Now, as an end user, and while this happens, as an end user, there are a couple of things that are important to me. Making sure that I get the virtual desktop so I can connect from anywhere. The other one is making sure that I get access to apps. Now, a lot of times when you are on the road or when you're not using your actual laptop, you need access to applications that you may not have natively installed. So how do you go about getting those? And still thinking when it comes up, I'll show you we've introduced a new concept of a software catalog that basically is my own personalized app store. So what the IT admin does has made available these list of applications that are available to me as Melissa, and only those, and it's my customized application store where I can actually take my applications and install them. And so it's just thinking it'll come up quickly. I didn't have this cached, but as Mike said, this is a live demo, so bear with us for 1 minute. And what you'll be able to see, so this is your XenDesktop, so it's a virtual desktop that you can all see here. And then all I'm going to show you is the self-service or the software catalog. So all I need to do is go into my internet access, and it's connecting to Configuration Manager software catalog. And these are the list of applications that have been made available to me through my IT administrator. And now, if I wanted to hit like Street and Trips, I can just basically install, and it's going to do the installation, right? What it also makes sure is that if the application had some requirements that it needed to install, like a lot of times we download a Word or a document and it needs Adobe, it's going to go ahead and install those requirements and then install the software that I just applied. At the same time, we have introduced a new feature called Supersedence, where it's going to make sure that my older version of the software is uninstalled and then the new app gets installed. So all of this is happening in the background automatically. I, as an end user, don't have to do anything here. So I'm just going to go no, because I don't want to go ahead and do this. And then let's show you the IT admin side. So this was all possible. I was showing you on the end user side. So how did this all come together? We've been talking about this. So as an IT administrator, I'm using 2012 Configuration Manager 2012 console and the ribbon bar that Mike talked about. So you have this Configuration Manager console. I go into Software Library. That's where I'm managing my apps. And one of the apps that I want to show is the Visio Professional 2010. So if I go here and I click on deployment types, now we're all familiar with applications. What is new in Configuration Manager 2012 is now you can create these different deployment types. And you can sort of be very specific, and you can optimize it for that experience. So what you're seeing is that I've created 3 different deployment types for Visio. One of them, this is where we have worked with our partners at Citrix, and we've extended the app model. So if an end user wanted to get these apps or get Visio from a non-mobile, non-Windows device, they would be able to get it through Citrix XenDesktop. The other 2, we are standardizing on AppV, so I'm making these available. One of them is to my VDI clients. The other one is for my slates and laptops. I can have more DTs or deployment types for desktops like machines, the servers. I can also have them for x86, x64. I can have many, many different types depending upon the device spectrum that I have. So let's walk through these 2 in some detail. Now, when you think about VDI, these are transient in nature. So when you're actually making an application available to them, you don't want to get the application to persist, right? Because you don't want it to be cached. So what I'm going to do is not make sure that it doesn't get cached. I also want this to be streaming. This is important because when you're doing VDI, you want to make sure that the application access is faster. So you don't, and so the streaming, it's actually being streamed directly. So you want this to be faster. So I'm going to do that. I'm also going to, right here, what I'm seeing in the publishing is I've disabled every other software application and only made Visio available to this. Then I'll go and add a couple of requirements. So this is basically, I'm going to add a couple of rules here. One of the primary rule I'll say is this device is, this is not the user's primary device. Now we're talking about VDI, and usually what we are saying is using our user device affinity that we've introduced in 2012, you can tell whether this particular device is a primary device or a secondary device. And what does that mean? Primary device is where I've customized it, personalized it. I have my photos, I have my desktop, I've personalized my desktop. I've done all of those things that are personal to me. That's on your primary device. How many of us, when we log in right now, when using your username and password on your any, like if I log into my next user, my colleagues, this thing, it will actually download all the apps that I have on my desktop and it brings that in. But that's not my primary device, right? So what you want to do is tie that affinity to. This VDI machine is not a primary device. So I'm going to say equals false. So the personalized information will not come down. I'm also going to say I'm going to add a new custom rule here that says it's virtual desktop type equals spooled. So what we are doing here, if I can spell it right, is we are now set this new rule, hit apply. What you're doing is you've created this rule to optimize the experience for VDI. So if an end user uses VDI to connect, they're going to get streaming only. They're only going to get Visio, the application that I published. It's not going to be their primary device, and information is not going to get cached locally because it's going to get regenerated anyway. That's my VDI experience. Let's walk through the slate and laptop experience. So we've created this new DT type called slates and laptops. What that means is for my end users who are using this machine as their rich desktop experience, they're traveling, they're on the road, they're at the airport, they want this application. Again, we're using AppV. But for my content, I do want it to persist because if they're traveling on the airport, they want to be able to get this application and not be relying on a network, right? So you want this to be there. You don't want it to be streaming. You want it to be from the distribution point and run locally. From a requirement standpoint, I'll add a couple of more requirements here. One is this is user's primary device. So we'll say this is true. Now this is where they'll get their personalized experience. I'll also add a new rule here to say this is the class of device where it has a battery. And what that basically means is we are adding a device. I think I'm going wrong here again. Let's see. Slate laptop device equals true. And what this basically means, there's a battery. So you're looking at the WMI class, and you're basically saying it has a battery in it. So now I've personalized this for my slates and laptop. The supersedence feature that I was talking to you earlier about as an end user, where you take care that the previous version of the app gets uninstalled and reinstalled, the new version gets installed automatically. Let me show you that through this feature. So you go back to your slates and laptops, and let's see if I can get this here. There you go. So once you click on this and you see all of these tabs that we were walking through, click on the supersedence tab. And now what you're saying, you're adding this, we're doing this for Visio 2010, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to supersede on Visio 2007. So you're loading your applications, and you're pointing to that Visio 2007 as soon as this happens. There you go. So I'll just click on Visio 2007. So I'm superseding this application. I'm going to say it should replace my AppV, and it should automatically uninstall. So 2007 will now automatically get uninstalled, and then 2010 will get installed when the user actually downloads that application. All I do is OK. Let me show you the graphical way of what you're seeing here is you're setting this up, and you can do this for requirements too, dependencies. You can do that, like I need some other prerequisites here. You can do that too. So if I just show you the graphical view of what we just did, click on supersedence, and it'll show you the graphical view of how these of all of this getting superseded. Okay. There you go. So what we just did is we created this supersedence relationship between 2010 on slates and laptops only around 2007, right? We did not do it for VDI, so you're not seeing it for VDI, and we are not doing it for XenDesktop. We're doing it only for 2010. So that's my creating this application deployment type. Now in this new user-centric world, all I need to do is click on this app at the higher level, which is 2010. It'll have those 3 DTs in there. And I'm going to deploy this app to my user. So no more do I have to actually deploy it to every device, but I'm going to now deploy this to a new user. And in this particular case, I'm going to just deploy it to my human resources department, which my end user is part of. So I'll deploy that and click next. Click next. You can specify the schedules. You can specify the end user experience. I'll just click next here. And then what you'll see is this is getting deployed. So very quickly, in a couple of, simply what you have done is you've created these different deployment types to take care of the broad spectrum that you have with this consumerization trend, and you've applied it. You've also made sure that automatically previous versions of products get uninstalled and newer versions get installed. You can also make sure automatically the dependencies are taken care of, prerequisites are taken care of, and very simply you're giving this experience to your end user. That's it. I'll get Garth back to talk about the next. There you go.
Thank you, Neha. So to kind of wrap that up, just a quick snapshot of what this is going to look like from your end user's perspective.
Wake up! Come on, push this. No.
This is Melissa.
Hey, Melissa.
Hey.
Sorry to have to call you at home. We need to put an offer into the director candidate. As you know, if she accepts, it will require some restructuring of the org, which we need to get VP approval on. I sent you an email with the updated org chart. Can you take a look at it? Send it out for approval tonight?
Sure thing. I'll do that right now and CC you on the approval email.
Thanks, Melissa.
Sure. See you tomorrow. Thank goodness they gave us the ability to connect to a virtual PC at work from our home PC to handle urgent requests like this. I just log in here, and voila, It's a virtual system back at work. Let me open my Outlook. Yep, there's the email. Let me try and open it. Ah, drats, it's in Visio. Go to the software catalog. Okay, there it is. Look at the description. Yep, that's the tool for the org charts. That must be it. So install it here. This will probably take a little bit of time. Oh wait, it says it's done already. That was fast. Double click it and there it goes. Great, I can look at this. Everything looks cool. Yep, that's perfect. I can send out this email for approval right now and get back to my movie.
Magic, huh? Magic. It's closer than you think. So in terms of, so that's a lot of the work that we've done around bringing to life this idea of user-centric management. The second is around unified infrastructure, and I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the advances that we've had kind of at the platform level and below us in Windows Server. The first is Windows Server 2008 R2, Service Pack 1 came out. A couple of new features, specifically Remote FX and Dynamic Memory, allowed us a lot better performance, not just for generic server workloads running on Hyper-V, but also in a desktop environment as well. So we did some recent benchmarks. These are actually fairly beefy servers. These are BL680Cs. These are tricked out with all the memory you can get, et cetera. They run about $60,000 a pop, but they're real-world hardware from our partners at HP. And we were able to do some great benchmarks, and while we're not allowed to do direct competitive benchmarking, we did look at sort of all the different hypervisors that are in the industry today and look at their latest public benchmarks. And across SharePoint, SQL, and Exchange, the level of scale and performance that we were able to get out of Hyper-V with SP1 is at or better than anything available in the industry today. And so you heard Robert talk about HSBC this morning. We've talked about Target in the past running their entire North American retail operations on Hyper-V within all of the Target stores, et cetera. So we're feeling very good about our ability to have a hypervisor that provides unapologetic Tier 1 performance for mission-critical workloads. On the desktop side in particular, looking at VDI, this I believe we're using, the latest benchmarks we had here, we're also using Dell hardware as well, but we have the highest VM density available in the industry, sort of in VDI. So that's across both Citrix and VMware's latest published benchmarks. We're getting better results on Service Pack 1. And then Remote FX gives you the full synchronized, full fidelity audio and video experience. And so we worked for 10 years to remove GPUs from the servers. Now we're actually putting them back in and giving you a high fidelity audio visual experience over a VDI environment as well. And then in terms of just the raw density that we're getting with SP1, the higher densities are actually getting us the lowest cost per user of any infrastructure in the benchmark. So to talk about VDI again, let me bring Neha up. She's going to give us a quick peek at System Center 2012 and showing you how we've gotten a lot smarter about understanding whether the Windows image is running on a physical device or in a VDI environment, and some of the tools that we're going to make available to you through System Center. Take it away, Neha.
Okay, this works. There you go. So what I'm going to talk about, Garth talked about this unifying the infrastructure. I'm going to show you is how we are bringing together physical and virtual management all in the same console. Now, virtual management, when we think about virtual client management, there are two primary ones that we are concerned about. One is personal virtual management clients, and then there's pooled virtual clients. Personal virtual clients, as we all know, is a dedicated OS that we are providing to each one of our end users. So those are really managed just like a physical desktop. And the thing that you really want to talk from a monitoring perspective is you want a little bit more information, whether it's a physical or a virtual. But the pooled virtual desktop is a little different. There are specific features you can apply because what you're doing there is you're sharing that image out between multiple end users, right? So let's walk through both of those scenarios and see what we do. So first one is the personal virtual desktop. So in personal virtual desktop, as I talked about, the classic example is around monitoring. You do a simple patch Tuesday, and when you go into this to see if your desktops were patched, traditionally right now administrators have to do a lot of manual process to find out whether it's a physical machine or a virtual machine. And it's very important because if you want to do troubleshooting, you have to figure out whether it's a physical machine or a virtual machine. And this has been a lot of manual scripting to get to that metadata of that machine. But now with ConfigMan, it's very simple because we've introduced this new type called desktop type. And right here in the console, we can tell. So if I just sort by device, it will show me whether it's a personal device, personal virtual machine, or it is a physical machine. So for example, this particular one is a personal virtual machine, which means it's a virtual machine. And this one here is a physical machine. So now you can go and do different troubleshooting in order to make sure that it gets actually patched. So that's one thing of it. And so how did we really do this? If you go into administration, we all know about this default policy. If you want to apply a policy to your client machines, we apply this default policy. We all know Configuration Manager. You can do these default policies around all of these different things, right? Client policy, compliance settings. But now what you can do is apply the same policy to all your machines, whether they are physical or virtual. So this will take care of your personal virtual desktops. But for your pooled machines, I've created a separate policy here because I want to make sure that this policy gets applied a little differently. And in order for that, first of all, is I need to collect whether it's a pooled machine or not. So I've gone in here and created this new hardware inventory class. So I go in here and I set classes. What you'll see is we have introduced a new inventory class called virtual desktop. If I go all the way down here. And this is new in 2012. And you can actually set this up. And we're now collecting the broker site information, the desktop pool name, the desktop type. This gives you a lot more information about that pooled machine or that pooled virtual machine to be able to set policies on there. So one of the big automation areas is around VDI storms. I don't know how many of you have seen a VDI storm or have been personally involved in a VDI storm. But currently, what administrators have to do is manually go and stagger them. And it all comes from experience. If you're an experienced administrator and from your peers, you can then stagger them really well, and you've created these scripts to go and do that, right? With Configuration Manager 2012, we've added a new feature. I can't even show it because it's all automatic. It's called randomization. And what we are doing is we are randomizing hardware inventory, software inventory, and the software updates for these virtual machines to make sure that you don't get these VDI storms anymore. So all of that is automatic. It's more optimized. Let's look at the last one. So now you have this group of machines that are pooled. And the classic scenario about software update, you don't want to update your pooled machines. Like you don't want to patch your pooled machines. Why not? Because you're patching the base OS as a physical machine, and once that base image is actually patched, you don't need to patch those pooled machines anymore because it's the same base image that they're sharing, right? So what you're going to do is you're going to create this new pooled virtual desktop, and I have this new group created. And what I'm going to do is I have this all desktop clients. All I need to do is go into the membership. So in properties, I go into membership list, and I'm going to exclude my desktop, my pooled virtual desktops from this group. So I'll go and I'll create a new rule of a new exclude rule. This is also new in 2012. And we'll go ahead and add this one. And now I hit apply. So now when I'm applying a policy to all my client desktops, that policy will not get applied to my pooled virtual desktops, making sure that you can be a little bit more specific about what features go down to this. The last thing we've done is we are now persisting the uniqueness of these pooled machines, the virtual machine, the virtual desktop. So whenever a VM is started or VM is shut down, we're actually reclaiming that uniqueness of that machine so that the applications are provided much faster. And in this way, we are providing both management for physical and virtual desktops, but really optimizing it for that virtual experience so it becomes easier. Thank you, Garth.
All right, so a quick sneak peek at some of the new enhancements coming for running in a virtual desktop environment. How many people are running VDI today? Okay. So we think that VDI, it's a great use case. It's probably great for every company out there, probably not every desktop. But in the case of HSBC, you heard this morning, they're going to be rolling out 100,000 desktops as the primary way of doing VDI. VDI, we've learned over time, VDI is a little bit more expensive than a traditional well-managed PC environment. But in highly regulated environments, healthcare, financial services, et cetera, the extra premium that they're paying to get the VDI experience, to be able to lock down that image within their data center and protect their data, makes a lot of sense for those customers. So we're happy to embrace that with System Center. Now, moving off of the management and into endpoint security, just a couple of quick stories about Microsoft. When we deployed Forefront Endpoint Protection 2010, we rolled that out across 300,000 desktops across the Microsoft environment. We did about 100,000 desktops deployed in one night in the final push. And as our CIO was he was getting up and addressing his all-hands meeting, we actually upgraded our CIO's machine while he was actually talking to his entire staff. And sort of as he was doing his presentation, a couple of toasters kind of popped up behind him, but it was a near silent install. And we had over a 99% success rate on that final push there. One of the great things about this deployment, 300,000 desktops, you can see here, we were able to get rid of about half of the software, the distribution points, the infrastructure that were required for pushing out signatures. And so when we rolled out endpoint protection on top of our ConfigMan infrastructure, again, that was 300,000 desktops, we added one extra server. And the only reason we really needed that server was one of our audit and compliance teams wanted to have a standalone server that they could run ad hoc reports against, just to make sure that they could attest that we, in fact, deployed all of the latest patches to all the different, or signatures to all the machines in our environment. So 300,000 server desktops managed by endpoint protection with one incremental server added. So we think there's a lot of opportunity to save customers money. Also in March, we announced that the endpoint protection is going to become part of the Core CAL. So the Core CAL is a licensing construct. Most customers with 250 seats and above purchase through the enterprise agreement. It's one of the most economical ways of licensing software from Microsoft. And the Core CAL has been a very stable, it's been a mainstay of our licensing in the enterprise for about 10 years. We've made no changes. This year we've announced that we're bringing Link standard and the endpoint protection into that Core CAL. And so really giving you a much more modern, a secure desktop experience, and also a more modern one in terms of a lot of the social elements that Link brings for IM presence and PC-to-PC voice scenarios working with your Office client. So this is going to become effective at the beginning of August. Anyone that's interested can actually request. You can talk to your account manager, and you can get what's called early use rights for deploying this stuff today. We've got close to 500,000 seats that have already been deployed for both Core CAL, for both Link and endpoint protection. And to give you a sneak peek of what that looks like today, this is actually truly an announcement. Just this week, we're announcing the beta of Forefront Endpoint Protection 2012. So 2010 was the version that shipped in December. We're happy to announce beta 1 of 2012 that's going to run on top of the existing System Center 2012 infrastructure and give you all that pretty UI that we've been looking at all day. So I'm going to bring AJ up here to show you what this looks like. Thanks, AJ.
Thanks, John.
All right. I'm really excited to show this demo and follow up with the announcement that Garth just made that Forefront Endpoint Protection 2012 beta is now available for you guys. I'm going to highlight 3 new benefits that are introduced in Configuration Manager 2012 today. With Configuration Manager 2012, you can now enforce compliance to your clients. You can also automatically deploy anti-malware updates through Configuration Manager distribution system. And lastly, I want to share user-centric rich reports that will be introduced in Forefront Endpoint Protection. But first, I want to start with the integration of Forefront Endpoint Protection and Configuration Manager. What you see here is that I'm monitoring Forefront Endpoint Protection deployment. This unified console will allow me to monitor as well as manage Forefront Endpoint Protection and unify the infrastructure for management and security. It also allows me to enforce compliance on my clients. Let's see how we can do that. In this case, we are monitoring compliance for our end user, Melissa. And as you can see here, Melissa's Slate device, let me zoom it, Melissa's Slate device is compliant. However, her laptop is not compliant, and forefront endpoint protection on her laptop is disabled. Obviously not a good idea, right? So let's see how we can enforce this compliance. With Configuration Manager today, 2012, you can now define auto remediation for such configuration drifts. We have already defined a rule for security compliance on Melissa's devices. We've actually deployed that compliance baseline to Melissa's devices as well. So I'm going to edit that policy, and as you can see from here, I can remediate non-compliant rules automatically with this policy. So I'm going to do that quickly. Now I have changed the policy so that any configuration drift will be auto-remediated. While that is done, let's see what else can we add in this compliance baseline. I've added forefront endpoint protection, but there are a lot of other security settings that I can include here. For example, I have Windows firewall settings, Internet Explorer settings that can be checked. Also, I have mobile device security settings included in this baseline. That means I can have multiple settings in just one baseline, and that one baseline can be deployed to multiple devices. Config Manager will do its magic. It will appropriately deploy specific settings for specific devices. So one baseline for multiple devices. Now that we have taken care of compliance, let me show you how we can ensure that forefront endpoint protection is always up to date. And for that, we have, in Configuration Manager 2012, we have introduced something called as automatic deployment rules. Forefront or Microsoft releases new signatures 3 times a day. And I don't have time to manually approve all those signatures. Now with ConfigMan 2012, you can define this automatic deployment rule and make it work for you. What I've done is I've created a forefront endpoint protection update rule here. And I can go into software updates, and I can classify which specific updates I want to get so that system knows that only definition updates for forefront endpoint protection can be downloaded from Windows Update Services. That's done. I can also schedule it for every 8 hours. So the update is going to be done every 8 hours, which matches Microsoft's frequency of providing signature updates for forefront endpoint protection engine. This is taken care of. We are now making sure that forefront endpoint protection is always up to date and security is always up to date for your clients. The next thing is monitoring your anti-malware activities. So here I have a report that shows malware activity in my environment. And this will give me an overview of security that's happening in my enterprise. It also allows me to go in detail for a specific malware that I want more details on. Here you see a traditional list of machines that are impacted. And this is where it gets exciting, really exciting, because using that user device affinity that Neha was talking about, we are now able to also list usernames and users that are impacted. So I get that knowledge, I get the impact on users, and now I can also get, because of that, I can also get impact on business. Now that helps me to get appropriate actions and remediation policies in place, knowing which users are impacted by this malware. So that's net new. That will be introduced in Feb 2012. Let's now go back to where we started, which was we were monitoring Melissa's devices for compliance. And as you can see here, there is no non-compliant device listed here. That means the setting that I had changed, the policy I had made for auto-remediation has worked. You can even see that Melissa's laptop is now compliant. Forefront endpoint protection was enabled automatically on that client. In closing, Forefront endpoint protection and System Center Configuration Manager together will let you unify your infrastructure for management and security and let your users have a simple and consistent experience. Thanks.
So everything that AJ and Neha and Mike has shown you today, myself included, a lot of that builds on our existing on-premise infrastructure. But as you heard, a lot of the thrust of the last, or of this week in general, is going to be about a shift to the cloud. And so what I wanted to do is give you guys a sneak peek at a product called Windows Intune. This went into general availability at the end of March, and then it'll have its second beta that comes out this summer. And then we'll be revving this very quickly, because as an online-based service, this is something where there's very little infrastructure that needs to be upgraded. We just upgrade simply the service as it is in our data centers, and we can start to stream a lot more functionality to you in real time. So let me switch over to the browser here, and I'm going to log in. Yeah, I got that. I know. HUSH? Yep. Yeah, give it a shot. There you go. You have the magic touch. My fat fingers didn't work. And so what you're seeing here, this is, I'm coming in as a partner. I'm actually managing multiple different sort of end client environments. You can see AData and Blue Yonder, et cetera, multiple different companies that I'm managing from a single console. And one of the nice things about a web-based service, this is all a Silverlight-based UI, so from whatever browser that I'm using, I can actually get in and manage all of my clients' PCs, no matter where they're running. I'm going to take a look at the Northwest Traders particular account. You can see, we can see what's going on within this client. Now, on the left hand, real quickly, I'll give you a quick overview. You can see the list of computers there. I can see and approve a list of updated software updates that I want to deploy within the environment. I've got the endpoint protection built in. So anyone here using the Microsoft Security Essentials product? No, not a lot of people here, but Microsoft Security Essentials, Forefront Endpoint Protection, and Intune all share the core engine, which gives us the broadest aperture of our radar. We can see more threats coming in than just about anybody in the industry. We can see a set of alerts. We can inventory all the software that's running within the environment. I can reconcile that against my license position, so I can actually look up from the Microsoft Volume License site what licenses I own and reconcile that against what's running. I can do some basic policy reporting and then administrative tasks. So if I want to take the agent and deploy it out within my environment, I can do that all from within a single console. Let me go to the overview real quickly. And from a single pane here, you can see that I've got a couple of alerts, but the malware one is one that I really want to take a quick look at. And so I'm going to see that there's one computer down here that needs follow-up, and I'll take a look at that. It happens to be my CEO's machine, so I want to make sure that that one's under control. When I come back, one thing you'll notice is that the malware has already been blocked, right? So endpoint protection is running. We've detected the threat. But if the CEO's been infected somehow, I want to make sure that we get a view of what else is running in his system. So I can take a look there. I can see all the updates that have been applied, the status of any malware that's been detected, alerts. In this case, I'm going to go take a look at software. And what this does is it gives me a view of all the software that's been installed in his machine, and I can pivot this either by user or by the software title or by the computer to see what's been installed. You can see, for example, the CEO's got Gears of War there. If I wanted to go see who else is running Gears of War within my environment, I could do that all within a single pane of glass. The last thing I want to do is come back and take a look at this. We've got a couple of updates that need to be approved. I'm going to go see the updates. I've got a security update for Windows 7. I typically automatically approve those things. I'm going to say I want to install that on every machine in my environment. I can click OK, and that's it. So that's a quick overview. That's 2 minutes. This is Windows Intune. It gives you an evergreen version of Windows, so you get the Enterprise Edition of Windows with great things like branch cache, direct access, BitLocker, etc. So some high-end functionality. You also get the upgrade rights, so that when we ship the next version of Windows, you'll be entitled to that. And then you get all the management and the endpoint protection all built in with a low price on the subscription. And that's a sneak peek. You'll see over time, it'll take us a few versions, but we are working on what we call intentional parity. So I've got Configuration Manager, which is a 16-year-old code base, as you've seen today, very rich set of capabilities in that. But what we're doing is reimagining endpoint protection and management as it might exist in a cloud. And over time, you'll see that we'll get to more intentional parity between what's available in Intune and then what's available for on-premise solutions like Configuration Manager and endpoint protection. So that's all we had for today's session. I've got one or two more slides to wrap us up, and I think we have time for Q&A. That was Intune. Again, hopefully what we've been able to show you is that we want to give you the tools that you've used for a long time, but we want to put you back in the driver's seat. So as new devices are coming in and sort of your end users are demanding more of you from a central IT perspective, we want to make you as flexible as you can be. We want to make you very responsive and allow you to provide that modern computing experience to your end users from a set of tools that you're already very familiar with. In terms of the roadmap, this is going to be a very big year for us, 2011 calendar year. We're in beta for most of the new versions of these products today, and then we will be in beta very, very shortly for a new product called System Center Orchestrator. This was a product that we had purchased earlier. That's going into beta imminently this summer, and then we will be shipping all of the entire System Center family of products by the end of this calendar year. And so with that, I think we will have some related sessions here. We've got a lot here. Many of the folks that we're presenting today will be doing breakout sessions over the next few days. So we have related sessions on security, identity, and management. We have a set of hands-on labs. I'd encourage you to go get your hands on the latest versions of the beta, and then additional track resources, and I think we can actually just go into Q&A. So if I could have the demoers come up on stage with me real quick. And please remember to fill out your evaluation forms and get yourself registered for that Xbox. All right, so Q&A.
We'll probably leave the tag up too here.
Yep. Question?
Currently, we're running in 2010. The migration in 2012, even though we'll have to deal with System Center 2012. Does it use the same engine, or has that totally been reconfigured?
So on the clients, so let me
repeat the question for the folks online.
So the question was, using Feb 2010 today, and for migration purposes, would the engine be different? So on the client side, we have made the migration easy. You don't have to deploy a new client or a new engine. Feb 2010 clients will work with Feb 2012 server. Well, our engine keeps updating with our definition updates. So, we continuously enhance our engine capabilities through that definition update. So you don't really need to deploy a new software or a client.
Yeah, I think the thing we want to make clear is you don't have to be on the latest version of the software to get that level of protection. Right? So the protection will, even for FCS, actually, we keep to try to make sure you're always protected. What you're getting with the new version is the reporting that you saw AJ show up. That reporting takes advantage of the new real-time reporting capabilities that are built in the Configuration Manager 2012. And then something else is also the distribution signatures that Garth mentioned. You don't even have to have a WSUS server anymore, because today you do, right?
Yep.
You don't anymore,
so
it'll actually use Config Manager.
Yeah. The automatic deployment rules that I was showing in my demo, that actually uses existing System Center Configuration Manager infrastructure. You don't need a WSUS extra. Okay. Yeah. So
yeah, and that's a big part of what AJ and Garth were talking about. That last thing about making your jobs easier actually is so that you don't have to be the person to say, well, that computer is not compliant. I got to go manually turn it back on. Even something as simple as a firewall, right? So a lot of those policies that you can actually set in Config Manager, you can actually the auto remediate button shows up in a lot of places. You can just say, hey, the agent should try to fix it first, and then only the tougher stuff that maybe something really weird is going on, do you really need to get involved? That removes you from having to do a lot of that day-to-day of like turning the AV back on, turning the firewall back on, mundane stuff like that. It's all built into Configuration Manager 2012.
There's a question in the back here.
There's a question.
Yep, I can answer the answer is yes.
Yeah. To both.
To both.
Yep.
The good thing is with Configuration Manager, what it adds on top of Active Directory is you don't have to have the Active Directory hierarchy. Right? The limitation of Active Directory really is that you can only have a very sort of one-dimensional hierarchy of things belonging to other orgs. It's very hard to say, well, this person, let's say, belongs to HR. They have, they belong in this geographic location, and they belong to this certain, department. All this stuff. In Configuration Manager, you can actually just define your collection however you feel that you would want to distribute things like policy or applications. So it's a much more flexible way. But yes, you can still use your Active Directory groups as sort of the basis there. Yeah.
In the PowerShell.
Yeah. Those are all just things we collect, we created.
Called collections within System Center.
Yes.
That's right. We're using the System Center database to store those. We're using the System Center database to store those collections, and it's tied to Active Directory. Yeah. The other one is about PowerShell, so you can use PowerShell. Everything that we show through GUI is also in the PowerShell and command lines. You can do everything through PowerShells. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Sure, go ahead. I know.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's the same thing that you saw actually Neha talk about in terms of randomization. That actually applies not just to the virtual desktop environment, where we automatically will recognize, right, that the fact that, let's say you have all these pooled VMs, we'll actually randomize that as well. So even though AJ set a setting for every 8 hours, it doesn't mean you're going to update everything all at once at exactly 2 a.m. Just like WSUS and just like Windows Update, there's actually a randomization factor such that if you actually look at it, it's pretty even. Yeah.
It is not large, that's correct. So every time we do it, it's a delta update and in some KBs. But even then, when you talk about virtual devices, there can be different storms, VDI storms happening. And so for that, as Mike said, we have enabled randomization for even the engine updates and even engine scans.
I think there were 2 questions on one in each corner here. Yeah. So today, that is the main integration we're doing, right? To bring all those types of devices into the same infrastructure so that you can run reports the same way you look at that infrastructure. And yes, they are actually, for all the devices that are connected through Exchange ActiveSync, we are only, we're not doing anything different or new. It is purely the Exchange ActiveSync policies. That's where we are today. But I guess what I can say is our commitment that Garth mentioned to bringing mobile devices under management is much broader than that, right? Like our goal, our strategy, our long-term future is that we're going to make mobile devices really a first-class citizen when it comes to devices that people work on, right? The fact is that there are going to be a lot more mobile devices out there. We already do a lot more. I think earlier, actually, during the demo, there was a question, well, can you push out certificates, right? What I showed was purely the non-Microsoft support. If you're using Windows Mobile, Windows CE, you can deploy applications, you can do all of that in that same UI. And then moving forward in the future, we're likely to look at bringing a lot of those capabilities to the wider platform as well, right? So we're not done with the mobile device management, right? We're literally just starting. But I would urge you to take a look at it, right? None of our competitors have even brought mobile devices into that same context, right? Good luck. You likely have to have multiple infrastructures for, all the stuff that we actually talked about today. And with what we showed, literally one install. You get all of it in one place.
It's a business choice that RIM has decided. They view the BES server as an important differentiator for their security, and they think they want to keep that as a differentiator. So they have not signed an Exchange ActiveSync licensing agreement. We'd like them to. They've just chosen not to. I don't think it's a technical issue. I think it's purely a business call on RIM's case.
In the video, this popcorn eating woman, she was installing Visio like in 3 seconds. First of all, what kind of platform was she on? Was that her dedicated virtual desktop, or was that more like a Citrix-like?
It was Zendesk.
Yeah.
Citrix
And the other
Zendesk.
thing is how, this was a video that I would have liked to see that live, but installed in 3 seconds.
Yeah, so that same demo was done in the flexible workspace. We actually did the demo, not the video. And there are a couple of things here. What Melissa was doing, we're showing is through VDI, Virtual Desktop Interface. So she was actually using her media center to connect at the back end. But we are using AppV. And so because we have optimized, one of the things you saw in my demo is we said if it's a VDI session, if somebody's using VDI session, they wanted to install an application, it should be streaming only, and it should only be from the stream from the local listing. And so what you're finding is it happens very, very fast because we're not downloading the whole thing locally.
It's streaming using AppV. Yes.
That's right.
That was a Citrix Zenit. We've done a lot of optimizations with Citrix.
For Citrix, that's right.
It really is that fast.
That's right. It is very fast because we're doing streaming. So we've optimized a lot for AppV and also for Citrix and desktops. It's very fast.
The experience you saw with NAHOP, granted it took like 15 seconds, right? But it's like that was a version of running on a tiny little shuttle server under this desk and hitting it for the first time, and the VM spinning up and Citrix getting that view, right? But obviously in a real production environment, you'll have bigger, beefier hardware there. It really is that fast.
Do we have time for one more question? Yep. Okay.
I heard that your keynote of Microsoft Summit was stated that Intune will replace SCCM. Is that correct?
Sure, over time. It'll take a while. Well, it's this idea of intentional parity is what I was talking about earlier. It won't take us the full 16 years to recreate all the functionality. One of the things about Intune, it's interesting. Like this is not. The IT environment as we understand it today and what it will look like in 5 years is very different from what it was when we started. With PCs in 16-bit environments, 16 years ago, right? And so one of the things that we're thinking a lot about is, doing things in a modern way. Embracing mobile devices as a first-class citizen earlier in our cycle, so having that sort of built in from the start. What I think you'll end up seeing is Intune will have a different feature set than SCCM, but we'll have an adequate feature set for most of our big customers, and that's the design point. That's a statement of intent and what we would like to do. Yeah, over time and migration, but that'll take longer. Yep. Yeah, we're actually, today we've got ConfigMan as our primary desktop management solution, so 300,000 desktops with endpoint protection, et cetera. As we buy new companies, Microsoft is a big enough company, we buy between 15 and 20 companies a year. And what we use Intune as a very lightweight, very rapid deployment. So if we just need to get a baseline set of management and protection on a new company's PCs that we've just bought, we put them out there immediately. And then over time, we'll migrate them into the core ConfigMan infrastructure. But this is a 1.0 product. We're going to iterate on it very quickly. We anticipate having basically like a spring and a fall release cadence, so 2 versions a year. And that'll allow us to have a lot faster cadence in terms of the features that we can get out to market. But I can't say whether it's going to take us 3 or 5 years to get to a point where it's good enough for you. I don't know. But that's the intent. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your tech ed.
Yep.